Welcome to this week's episode of We Got You Covered on RVN TV. We come to you every Friday at 2:30 and we talk about all things insurance and employee benefits. This week we have with us Fan Z, and we're going to be talking about employee well-being, fitness, absenteeism, and presenteeism at the workplace. Just to give you a little bit of background on Fan, I met Fan a few months ago, and ironically, he and I went to the same high school, Northeast High School in Philadelphia. Yes. Go Vikings, right?
Go Vikings.
Fan also has his medical degree from Thomas Jefferson University. He was the medical director for the Lancaster Rehabilitation Center, and he's currently the chief medical director of GriffinNX. So again, today we're going to talk about employee wellness programs, absenteeism, presenteeism, and after I talk to you for the first time, you're like a genius when it comes to this stuff. And our half an hour meeting turned into 2-3 hours. And so I'm just fascinated to hear what you're going to talk about today.
Yes.
But before we begin, I always like to throw out a statistic to the audience. And Sage People reported that employee productivity and engagement has been stagnant for decades. And productivity challenges are costing employers over $500 billion a year in non-productive employees. So Fan, when we talk about presenteeism and absenteeism, what is it and why should that be important to employers today?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head when you're talking about productivity. So as with any advanced economy, the goal is to try to increase your productivity because you have a limited workforce. And let's take our country, for example. We have a highly educated, highly trained workforce, but you can only increase that number so far. Given time constraints as well as educational and training constraints. And if you look at the number and break down, for example, the difference. So first of all, absenteeism, as the name states, is when workers are actually absent from the workforce or the workplace. And presenteeism is when workers are showing up, but they're performing at a much less productivity level because they're trying to basically got through a work day despite being sick, despite being not at 100%. And the numbers are staggering, like you said. If you look at 2018 statistics from CDC, the cost of absenteeism is about $225 or $230 billion. So the average employees the cost would be around $3,600 per year.
So an employer that has 100 employees, they're spending $300,000 to $500,000, if not more,
Correct.
Paying for employees to come to work, but just not be productive.
Exactly.
So they're just wasting their money. Well, not wasting their money, but
Right.
They're not spending it on employees that are giving them 100% during the day.
And that's missing productivity when it comes to absenteeism. And when it comes to presenteeism, the most recent statistics published by Forbes was that the cost is around $150 to $160 billion per year, amounting to approximately 57.5 workdays out of every single year.
Yeah, I saw that there was a statistic that the average employee was admitting that about 12 weeks a year out of their work year, they're really not productive. They're either tired or they have other things on their mind or they're just not being productive for the employer, which can hurt them in customer service. So they can be providing poor customer service, which could lose clients. And then when we were talking, you brought up something that was very interesting to me, and I'd like to talk about this. You talked about sales. So when an employer has a workforce that has sales professionals, sales representatives in there, if they're not performing, then that employer or corporation is not increasing their sales and they're going to become stagnant. You gave me a statistic or a group you were working on that talked about the sales representatives, how you went in there, did the Griffin process, and it actually increased and enhanced sales because you made those employees' well-being and their fitness much better than where it was before you got in there.
Right, correct. I mean, first of all, I think before we even answer that question, describe that particular scenario, is there's multiple reasons why a particular employee is being unproductive as a result of health issues that leads to absenteeism and presenteeism. And it's not simply just affecting the employer, because it's a 50-50 relationship affecting the employees, because it's going to affect their productivity bonuses, their ability to advance in their particular career, how they're being viewed by their supervisors, by their managers, by their bosses. And it's going to obviously affect their bottom line as well as the employer's bottom line.
So I know a lot of employers, they invest money in corporate wellness programs, smoking cessation, weight loss, and so forth. And their goal is to decrease absenteeism.
Correct.
And increase presenteeism. The problem that I see based on conversations that I've had with you is just because they're present doesn't mean they're productive.
Exactly. So going back to the one company that we worked with, the CFO, as well as the VP of marketing, they personally experienced that when, in their particular case, when their hormones were not optimized, they noticed that they were not as competitive or not as driven. And because they actually personally experienced it in themselves, they asked me to basically come in, give a presentation, and then we also provided testing to just see which one of their salespeoples could be optimized and improved. And pretty much it was, I would say, about 90% of the staff.
So when you talk about hormone imbalance and not being productive, what does that really mean at the end of the day? Can you go into a little more detail on
yes.
hormone imbalance?
So we'll go back one statement earlier when you were talking about basically what does it actually mean if someone is actually absenteeism when it comes to, or presenteeism, and what are some of the symptoms. So a lot of the constellation of symptoms are fatigue, depression, being not driven and not passionate about your work. And on top of that, you have people that's being just affected because they're more prone to illnesses, not having enough energy. And as you know, anyone who is involving sales or any human-to-human interaction, if you're not bringing that particular energy level, that friendliness, and that passion, the person you're talking to knows this. They can sense it, and they're not going to be as receptive to your particular message as well, and certainly your coworkers as well.
Sure. So you mentioned a few things. One was depression and one was fatigue. But employers have EAP programs. So if the employee feels depressed or they feel tired, they call the 800 number, talk to a counselor, and that's supposed to, I guess, help them or at least guide them in the right direction.
So that is absolutely correct. And when we're talking about corporate wellness program, most people have no concept or idea what exactly is a corporate wellness program. So until we start diving into, for the company that I work for, is when you actually look at corporate wellness program, there's multiple facets, and not any one of them is superior to the other. In fact, if you want to get the most benefit, you really want to target every single facet. And some of these facets include, you want to at least educate your workforce on optimized nutrition. So, and most people notice staying away from your fatty food, your typical burgers or fried chicken, etc. Having a regular exercise program, you're talking about at least 2 to 3 times per week. But some of the things that obviously you already talked about: smoking cessation, weight loss programs, and this is going to be beneficial again to both the employees on their personal level as well as to the employer. But one of the last things that most people don't look at is that our body, through most of the studies we have now available to us, has shown that you have different biomarkers that, if they're not optimized, that can potentially lead to a whole constellation of different chronic illnesses and predispose you to different illnesses, whether they are hypertension, diabetes, hypercholesterolemia, predispose you to depression, as well as obviously weight gain and a whole host of other issues as well. And you can easily monitor these biomarker level on a yearly or biannual basis and then determine how to optimize. And these things are very easily done, much easier, and you can actually measure it. You can see your improvement through the testing versus just getting on a phone with a counselor.
So basically, and in the second half of the show, we're going to go into biomarker imbalances and a little more in depth. So Griffin is really going in and testing employees using biomarker scientific processes to really show what imbalances a specific individual has, and then you're going to take it to the next step on how to, say, fix those imbalances, pretty much.
Correct. I mean, this pretty much falls within the specialty in medicine called integrative medicine. It's a discipline that is being pushed by, I would say, the largest society is the A4M, which stands for American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. It covers multiple aspects, whether it is different antioxidant levels, vitamins, micronutrient levels, as well as looking at hormonal levels, and trying to basically educate the patient that if you start at a very early level and monitor your levels and understanding what is actually optimal for you, and then you can do certain things, whether it's nutrition changes, lifestyle changes, or supplement changes, to basically keep your body functioning at a much, much higher level.
Perfect. Well, we come to that part of the show where we have to recognize our sponsors. And when we come back, we're going to be here with Fan Z talking about employee productivity, wellness, well-being, and specifically we're going to be talking about biomarker imbalances. And right before the break, Fan is talking about how we can do the testing and look at different biomarkers. We're going to go into more detail. We'll be right back with you, and we got you covered here with Fan Z.
With our vast selection of fine wines and spirits. Choose from handmade pastas, artisan cheeses, organic produce, and grocery items, all from the finest purveyors. We're Stelly Market Fresh, from our family to yours.
RVN TV is a platform for people of any industry to share their story. Over 285,000 viewers are tuning in to RVN TV shows monthly. We guarantee a great experience that you'll be sharing with everyone you know while increasing your personal and company's brand awareness. But what is your brand? According to Forbes, it's a combination of your logo, your product, your design and feel, and your personality. Did you know that aside from being a guest, we offer even more opportunity to boost your brand? Adding your company logo and website on screen during your interview will allow viewers to recognize your brand instantly. Incorporating images and video clips is another great way to showcase your product during your live segment. Let viewers see how good you really are. And most importantly, there's you and your interview. For less than the cost of a newspaper, direct mail, or a magazine ad, you can leave our studio and within 48 hours have a permanent digital copy of your live segment to link to your social media, embed into your company website, or use in email marketing. Investing in your brand is so very important, and we can't wait to have you as a guest.
Shelter dogs aren't broken. They've simply experienced more life. If they were human, we would call them wise. They would be the ones with tales to tell and stories to write, the ones dealt a bad hand who responded with courage. Do not pity a shelter dog. Adopt one.
Say we've got grit, and we'll take it as a compliment. Because it's our uncommon drive, our spark within, that brings us together and sets us apart. We are temple made. And when others take short...
Welcome back to We Got You Covered on RVN TV. I'm your host, Rob Shestack, and we're here with Fan Z, who is the Chief Medical Director of GriffinNX. And Fan, right before the break, we were talking about biomarker imbalances and biomarker optimization. So we know if employee is absent, they're sick or something's wrong. But if they're at work, just because they're present doesn't mean they're productive, right? And it could be fatigue, depression, and a whole bunch of things. And that can relate to biomarkers. So when I think of biomarker, I think of genetics. So I could be predisposed for a cancer or diabetes or some other condition. But your process and your concept on biomarker imbalances is really related more to nutrition and vitamins and supplements and so forth, correct?
It's a little bit more than that. So first of all, what is a biomarker? Biomarker is any biological marker that you can actually measure in a reproducible way. So this can even include your weight, your blood pressure, your heart rate, etc. But another category within the biomarker are actually blood biomarkers. So these would be anything that is measured through blood testing. We can be looking at different vitamin levels, for example, vitamin D, B12 levels, or looking at your hormone levels, as well as looking at different antioxidant levels, as well as micronutrient levels.
So if I do this biomarker testing, I do the blood draw, and then you get a report back. And what's that report going to tell you? It's going to tell you if I need more vitamin D or less vitamin B12. What's that report going to look like?
So your typical physician, and I have gone through the same training as pretty much every other physician in the country, is that we're taught only to recognize what's abnormal. And the thing most people do not understand is that what is actually normal and abnormal when it comes to a lab testing is a statistic analysis. So you're basically taking a lab, or different companies will basically take numbers going as young as 16 years old. Anything younger than that is considered pediatric data. And then as old as 80 or 85 years old. And then you basically do a statistic analysis. You get a curve, and you take the median number, and you move 1 or 2 standard deviation to either side of that number, and voila, you have your normal range. It doesn't mean it is optimal. I mean, the simple question would be, do you want to be more like the 85-year-old version of yourself, or more the 18 or 20-year-old version of yourself? And once you understand that, you now can basically look at that particular number and say, well, it is still black and not red, meaning technically it's normal, but is it actually optimal? And if it's not optimal, what are the symptoms that it can actually cause, and what are some of the diseases? And am I having these types of symptoms or actually diseases?
So the doctor will do blood work, say on an annual basis for an annual physical, and then they'll get a report back from the lab. And let's just say, and I'll keep it real simple, let's just say a scale from 1 to 10, because I know some of them have different levels and so forth, like cholesterol and so forth. So let's just say all my biomarkers come back at 3. So the doctor looks at it, it's all 3, everything is green is good. Rob, you're okay, your blood work came back normal. But what you're saying, just because it's a 3, that may make me more like an 85-year-old, which is in that statistical data you were talking about, but that may not be optimal to me. I may want to be an 8. So I'm still within that 1 to 10, but 3 is not optimal for me, but 8 maybe. So I may need to have 8s all across the board, but my doctor's not recognizing that for me.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we can use several examples, one of them being vitamin D, another one being testosterone. So if you're talking about vitamin D, most people just simply assume, oh, vitamin D deficiency is a thing of the past. It's something that we have obviously conquered in the last 150 years. But what I have just noticed from my own private practice is that pretty much 95% of the people that I test are either moderately to severely vitamin D deficient. I personally, in the last year, have only tested 2 patients that have moderately normal. So what does it mean? So if you look at if you ever had your vitamin D tested, your normal range is ranging from 30 to 100 nanogram per deciliter. And there's multiple studies that have shown that you start to have symptoms that resembles chronic fatigue if you're even lower than 60. And if you're at, say, for example, 40, your doctor or myself, just maybe 5 years ago, would have told you, hey, Rob, your numbers are absolutely normal. Continue doing what you're doing. Or they would basically tell you, hey, Rob, take your recommended, or RDA, recommended allowance for your vitamin D supplementation, which is 2,000 international units. But if you dive a little bit deeper, as we have, what basically we found is that the way they calculated that RDA number only gets you barely to 20 nanogram per deciliter. So that is actually lower than the cutoff point. So now you basically have to say, well, where is your level? Am I experiencing certain symptoms? For example, with vitamin D, it affects multitude of different things, from testosterone level, because it's a pro-hormone, to affecting someone's immune status, being able to fight off your common infection because it's required for immunoreceptors in your white blood cells. So you have to basically look at, okay, how much am I supplementing? What type of supplement? Because it's a fat-soluble vitamin. So we, as a company, go through all of that. So it's as if you're getting a consultation with an integrative medicine physician, except we provide animated video to explain the whole process, as well as the detailed personalized report that you can basically reference back to and consult with your own personal physician.
When my doctor does blood work for me, is he looking at my vitamin D levels typically?
Most likely not.
Most likely not, right?
Yes.
So you're saying a simple vitamin, and we'll just use vitamin D as an example, 30 to 100, I'm at 40 or 50, and my doctor, if he tests for it, which most likely he won't, if he tests for it, that's going to be on the low end. And you're saying you can say, hey, you increase your vitamin D supplement, increase this, and that alone could maybe decrease my fatigue, make me more, happy, so I don't have depression or anything like that. And that alone could help me be better fit, better engaged at my job, better engaged in life, my family, and so forth.
Yes, and I'll do a proviso description. So there are a number of things, almost limitless, that can potentially give you, say, fatigue symptoms, depression symptoms, etc. I mean, you could be partying too hard in the evening, or you could be experiencing some personal tragedies and stress. No one would know. But some of them are identifiable, such as a vitamin D deficiency or B12 deficiency, and they can downstream lead to other issues. For example, if your vitamin D is too low for a prolonged period, it can affect your hormone levels, which is testosterone, which can in turn affect to decrease competitive drive. So everything now becomes sort of like a circle, and if you don't know what to look for, you're certainly not going to try to correct these. And it's very easy to start simply treating symptoms, such as giving someone an antidepressant.
So let's say mild depression, I'm on medication. So one, I'm taking a medication that most people would prefer not to take medication, prescription medication, if they didn't have to. Two, it costs my healthcare plan money, and it costs me some copay or deductible to receive that medication. So you're saying it is possible, by increasing or managing certain type levels of vitamins in my body, I could possibly stop taking that drug or get off that drug because there's other deficiencies that I have outside that one medication.
Yeah, so what you're trying to do is at least eliminate the identifiable causes, and then work. So what we simply do is provide you with the tools so you can work with your personal physician on a much more comprehensive way than simply going in, complaining of symptom, being given a medication that treats that symptom only and not looking at your root causes, because most physicians are overworked nowadays. They're given basically about 10 to 15 minutes to speak to you. Out of that 10 to 15 minutes, the first 5 minutes is just getting to know you again after not seeing you for 6 to 12 months. So really now you're down to about 8 to 10 minutes to find out what your symptoms are and figuring out what to do. And most physicians, again, it's trained to basically just write you a prescription.
If I receive this report back from Griffin, go through the counseling session and show where all my biomarkers, let's just say they're technically all normal, but you're saying I should increase this or decrease that and so forth, and I take that recommendation to my physician, do you see that most physicians are willing to sit down and listen to the patient when they have this report? Or they, listen, I'm your medical doctor, your blood work came back normal, that's good enough for me, continue to take your, say, antidepressant medication?
I would say it depends. So there are certain physicians who may not see the value in this, but what we try to do is give multiple avenues and methods for someone to try to improve their health. So we try to give a little personalized recommendation when it comes to lifestyle changes, when it comes to certain nutrition changes, providing tables and what type of food to eat, how much to eat, a sample type of meal description, as well as what type of supplement. So, for example, coming back to particular vitamin D, do you want to be taking a pill or do you want to be taking a capsule? So you want to do most of the time a capsule, since this particular vitamin is a fat soluble vitamin. That kind of drill down specific advices that you typically are not going to get.
Wonderful. Well, we are running out of time,
Yes.
and we are going to have you back on another show for sure. But real quick, so I think if an employer is spending $300 to $500 a year per employee on health and wellness programs, whatever they are, EAPs or smoking cessation and so forth, they could redirect that money into something that is more biomarker specific to an individual versus saying, here's my overall aggregated program, but now take that money and put it in more specifics and then make each employee individually, say, more efficient at their job or healthier because now it's specific to that employee versus just to a workforce.
Exactly, and this is one of the reasons I joined this particular company, is that our team is really dedicated to improve individuals' health and try to really change the dynamic of how medicine or how health is being looked at. And there are specific programs that we are offering that essentially don't cost anything to either the employer or the employees.
Wonderful. Well, Fan, thank you very much. I really appreciate this, and hopefully that gave some information to our audience. So if they do have any questions and they'd like to contact you, can you tell the audience how they can reach out to you?
Yeah, you can email me at fanzmd@gmail.com, and then I can refer you to our business development directors, or if you have any specific medical questions, you can ask me via email there.
Wonderful. Well, Fan, thank you very much for coming. I really appreciate your time today.
Yeah, pleasure
and,
to be here.
You know, that wraps up our program for today. Thank you for tuning in to We Got You Covered on RVN TV. My name is Rob Shestack. This is Van Z. And just remember, when you have the opportunity, please pay it forward. Have a great weekend.